Good morning. We're in the second Sunday of Lent, and the church very intentionally presents us with different passages from the Gospels to kind of help us reflect on the season. So in the second Sunday of Lent, we always read a Gospel that gives us an account of what we hear today. We call it the Transfiguration, or the change. The Gospels aren't stories that somebody made up later about Jesus. They're not just, psychological projections of our desires. They're eyewitness accounts of the life of Jesus. We can talk another day a lot about kind of the internal evidence within the Gospels and in history that these are eyewitness accounts. But for today, we could just think about this. The Gospels, they're not very flattering about the apostles, even though the apostles were the ones who wrote the Gospels. If you were making up a story and you wanted to convince the whole world that it was true, you would probably want to help people think that the people who were telling this story you made up are reliable. Peter, the first pope, John, Jesus' favorite, his beloved disciple, James, at this time he was the head of the church in Jerusalem. You'd want to make them look really good. These are people you can trust. And so, when Jesus appears in all of his glory, speaking to Moses and Elijah, who had lived hundreds of years before him, and the Father is saying, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." They're asleep. They're there on the ground, conked out. And they come to, they're like, overcome by sleep, becoming fully awake. He saw his glory. Wow, it's Jesus. Something stupendous is happening here, right? They've seen Jesus. They've followed him. They sense that there's something exceptional about this man. They follow him immediately. They leave everything. They've heard him speak these powerful words. They know he's got great stuff to say. They've seen him do amazing things. They love being around this man. It's like Deacon Al. But then something else happens. Right? There's glory. There's something coming out of his face like light. And then these men Moses and Elijah, right, they're speaking to Jesus, right? It's like, love being around Deacon Al. But if while I was giving my homily, I fell asleep and then woke up and I looked up and there was light coming out of Deacon Al's face, and like George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were standing there talking to Deacon Al about how important the next couple months of his life are going to be, you would go, there's more to Deacon Al than I thought. Right? This is what's happening. Right? The disciples are learning. They're uncovering, okay, we love this man. We want to be around him. But there's also something more here. What is the more about him? It's that he's not just an exceptional man. He's God. He's fully human and fully divine. And when the Father speaks from heaven and says, "This is my beloved," we find out that Jesus is the second person of the Trinity, the Son. And the one who reveals him is the Holy Spirit. But what does that have to do with us? Jesus lets his disciples see this because he knows that the coming months and years of being his disciple are going to be hard. Moses and Elijah speak to him about his exodus. What's the exodus? It's when God led the Jewish people out of slavery in Egypt to freedom. When Jesus goes to the cross and when he rises, that's our exodus. And he wants to strengthen the disciples because it's going to be hard. Even with a deeper awareness of who Jesus is, when it comes to the cross, when Jesus is arrested, all of his friends run away. He's abandoned, really, by his closest followers. Jesus wants to strengthen us because he is good, but life is hard, and following him is not easy. We maybe need to ask during Lent for eyes to see more clearly, to see who God is more clearly, to perceive his glory, and to perceive his glory on the face of our neighbor, created in his image and likeness. If we're conked out, asleep, we're going to miss it. Jesus wants to give us a kind of alertness about what's important in life. In the proportion that we surrender to him, we will see great things.